Good evening. Welcome to the Town of Auburn Zoning Board of Appeals meeting Thursday, January 18, 2018. Now called to order at approximately 7 p.m. This meeting is being recorded and broadcasted live by local access programming. Is there anyone in the audience that's also recording? Not hearing any. At this time, I'd like to remind the audience, applicants, town administration, each of the board members to please refrain from asking any questions regarding to all matters discussed this evening without first asking my consent. So we have three hearings this evening, all of which are continued, and there lies open. A bit of housekeeping before we begin our first hearing. We have an absent member of the board, Bob Tatro, and so at this time I'm going to ask our alternate Karen Blaze to step forward and be a voting member this evening. Okay. Without objection. So thank you, Karen. Welcome, as always. So our first hearing, a 7 p.m. applicant, Longwood Development Corp. Requesting special permits under sections 3.2.7.1 and 4.3.5.1 and variances under sections 5.4 and 4.3.5.1 of the Auburn zoning bylaws for the construction of a 4,000 square foot industrial use building on property located at 19 Mill Street, Auburn, Mass., map 42, parcel 11. And again, this is a continuation of the hearing from November 16th, 2017. Is the applicant present?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, Mr. Broder.
Thank you. Attorney Todd Broder from Fletcher Tilton here on behalf of Longwood Development Corporation. The last time we were in front of you, we had a lengthy discussion about some of the site design issues, and the suggestion was made that we submit the plan for peer review, and we intended to do that, but in that intervening time, we were able to make some modifications to the site plan, particularly the location and size of the building. And so rather than send on to Graves a plan that would be potentially modified, we thought we'd come back, present the suggested proposed new plan to you, and then kind of go from there based on the board's feedback. So if I may, the plan differs in the following ways. The location of the building has transitioned from one side of the lot to the other. So instead of the building being located as you go into the lot to the right, it is now located as you go into the lot to the left, which is closer to the power station, which is immediately adjacent to this property. So there'll be a natural vegetative buffer in there, but this building and the improvements will get pushed in that direction away from the Sear Electric facility, which is immediately adjacent to this property. So that's the first change. Additionally, the building has shrunk from excuse me, from 4,000 square feet to 3,500 square feet. We're able to, lose some of the bay area and reduce the office space a little bit, shrink the footprint of the building. The primary purpose there was to try to do the best that we could to stay away from, look for as little relief as possible from the front yard setback variance that we're seeking. Previously, the building was set to align with the Sear Electric building and be set back only 15 feet from the front property line. As currently constituted on the proposed new plan, the building is 27 feet from the front property line, so needing a variance of only 3 feet at this point. So we felt that that was a major improvement to the plan, which certainly is different than what you saw before. Excuse me. In addition, we supplied to the board a stormwater pollution prevention plan and a stormwater management illicit discharge compliance statement produced by the engineer, with the concept of trying to do more to show that the site and the applicant and the owner would be prepared in the event that any of the uses on site contributed to some sort of discharge on site with the gas or petroleum products that are used on site. So those are prepared and have been submitted for your review. So those are really the changes. And the building style that we talked about is the same. The office will be out in the front area, fronting on, on the front of the building. The bays will be in the back. There still is a little bit of room for outdoor storage, kind of behind the building to the rear. Again, pushing up against the New England Power site, it was felt that it hides the building a little bit more. It hides that outdoor storage a little bit more, and is a little bit more compatible with the area.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
And anything else to add before I open it up to the board for questions?
No, I'm happy to answer any questions, though.
Thank you very much. So I think in fashion of letting ladies first start, because we typically go to this side of the room, I think I'll start, not to put you on the spot, but Ms. Blaze, questions?
I don't have any further at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roach? And I'm happy to start down here if you would prefer.
Nope, I'm good. I guess the only just one question I have, and I know we really haven't talked that much about parking. A couple people going to work in the office, I assume, and that's it. You don't expect a huge influx of cars in and out of this.
Correct. Mr. Perro and his son are really the only office workers, and I think they have a bookkeeper and admin person that's in there with some frequency. Most of the other employees are out on jobs all day, and they may come back to the site at the end of the day. They may not even do that with their pieces of equipment, because often those are left on site as well.
Right.
So it's in the morning to kind of get machinery, et cetera, and get out to a job, or at the end of the day for the significant percentage of the employees. Mr. Perro and his son may in their pickup truck be in and out a few times a day, but it's not
No
significant.
reason for any retail, no outside people to be. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Cussy?
I'm happy that it's 27 feet back from the road. That was a big plus. But yeah, I would still just want it to go out for peer review. These plans, I just want to make sure, because it's an aquifer. Other than that, I'm happy with the shrinking the building down, and the setback is nice. Yeah, peer review would be what I would be looking at.
Thank you. Mr. Chacolo?
All set.
No additional questions this evening?
All set.
I just have one, Mr. Berger. Could you remind me on the diagram where the drive-in to the building is? Thanks. That hasn't moved. Yeah, no, I know the curb cut. Thank you. I'm sorry.
The driveway.
But it's straight into the building, right? It's not on the side?
The driveway opens, it comes straight into the parking area.
Yeah, I apologize. I need to call for my question. What I really wanted to ask is where the building bays are open, the garage bays are open.
They will open towards the Sear Electric building. So you can pull into the parking lot, swing into the bays.
There are no modifications there then? That's
No.
consistent with what we talked about last time?
Correct.
Okay, very good.
Just swap which side of the lot they're on,
Okay.
the building is on.
All right, thank you. I, for one, would just share, I appreciate the thoughtful redress of some of the things that we talked about before. There's certainly been significant modifications, in my view, of where this project initiated. Any additional questions from the board?
No?
Are there any abutters this evening that would like to speak?
No, I think I'm fine.
If you want to approach, sir, and just let us know your name and...
Bob Carlson, 26 Mill Street. I think the setback works pretty good. My concern is if the triaxles are going to have enough room to get out on that road, that's all. On top of that, do they have to warm up for a certain period of time outside before they do move because of the air system? I don't know if this is the right board to address that or not, but yeah, just a couple of things, because it's heavy duty now. I think if anybody did a traffic survey, they'd be overwhelmed by, the tractor trailers. The road is heavily used, so I'm just, I don't want to see an accident. I've seen enough, and there's a lot of hostility going on that road, and it's just incredible, so I thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate your comments, sir. Mr. Bernard, would you care to address any of the questions that your butter had raised?
Well, I think that I mean, the traffic in and out is going to be pretty limited. You know, again, as we talked about last time, I talked a little bit about tonight. It's really a launching place in the morning and a return pad in the evening. There's nobody really in and out during the course of the day. They have no reason to be kind of back and forth. So the equipment is quite oftentimes left out on jobs. It's at this location in between jobs, or as I said, kind of at night as it's at rest. So I mean, I'm not sure the traffic that's added from this project is significant. I certainly understand the concern, but I don't think that this particular project adds a lot of traffic to this area. In terms of being able to get kind of in and out of the site, we could open up the driveway if that was a true concern. I'm not sure that there's not. I think the way it's set up here, it's a minimum of 25 feet wide, and it opens up when you get to the road. So it appears to me there's plenty of room to swing, but I didn't put a truck template on this thing or anything like that before I started speaking to you about that, so I couldn't be quite sure. But if that was a concern, we could open up the driveway a little bit, if that made any sense.
I believe there was an additional question, if I may, not to speak for the abutter, but one of if there's any warming period for the trucks or the equipment, any period of time that they have to essentially be started up and remain stable. I guess I'm aligning that with perhaps diesel trucks that need to warm up early, and how long that period would be. I think that was, and I want to make sure that I'm capturing the abutter's question correctly.
I can't speak to that item, and unfortunately, Mr. Perro couldn't be here tonight to answer the question himself. I think your intuition is probably correct. I think on a cold day, something needs to be warmed up, whether it's your car or some sort of truck used for this, operation. But I think it's fairly minimal, the disturbance to the area, particularly when you think about this is in very close proximity to Route 20, which is a very heavily utilized, road system with tractor trailers up all day long, diesel, etc. So.
Okay, thank you for addressing that. And I'll ask one more time, given the abutter is here. Any additional questions, sir? And if you do have any, sir, just to make sure that the folks at home and for recording, if you could come to the microphone. Okay, so thank you very much, and thanks for your comments. Any additional questions from the board?
I was just wondering, Caleb, do you have any input in this?
I don't.
Not seeing any additional questions. I have one follow-up question just to confirm. The issue had been raised about the curb cut and the size of the driveway just based on pulling in and pulling out. And so, Caleb, just confirming, this will go through site planning, and I would imagine the questions like that will be addressed directly, correct?
Yes, this will go to planning board, so they could request a traffic study if the abutters felt that was appropriate, if the board felt that was appropriate. They would also look at the stormwater management and the lot and the parking, and they could put templates on the turn to make sure trucks could make that turn.
Okay, thank you very much. So I offer that just for the abutter's sake, because he did raise those questions, and those are areas that another board would address directly.
Mr. Chairman, and Caleb does raise a good point, and one that the staff had made to us. The project from here would need to go on to Conservation Commission because of the wetlands in the rear of the property, and also on to Planning Board for site plan approval. So I don't want you to think we're trying to dodge peer review, but I think what I was hoping that we might be able to accomplish was to receive the approvals from this board to know that the project can move forward to the next stages, and we would go to Conservation and Planning, where it would go through a peer review process with Planning Board. Same plan, same information, etc. And I'm sure they can condition however they see fit in terms of those items that Caleb mentioned, stormwater and the rest. So, I'm getting a positive sense from the board as far as the project and the changes that we made, and that's a good thing. But I mean, that typically we don't go through peer review from your board. We go from Planning Board and take up kind of all those issues at one time. And I guess I would make that request
Okay, thank you for your comments. And so I'll bring that comment back to the board, and Mr. Cussy, you had raised it.
Yeah. So does the planning board usually send the plans out?
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Broder. It would probably be premature for us to ask for peer review at this time before the variance was granted. We can certainly attach conditions that are standard for an aquifer special permit, so the aquifer is protected, subject to any changes made by the planning board.
Any additional questions?
Nope, that's good.
Okay. All right, and that sounds like it would satisfy your request for peer review. So I'll just go around very quickly. Mr. Colo, any additional questions?
I have a question that would probably be to Caleb, and that would be, due to the changes that have been made, do we need to amend the application at all? Just so that we fit to the letter of the law?
No, I think anything can be addressed in the decisions. The size of the building changed, location changed, but we can clean that up with the decisions.
Great.
Ms. Blaze, any additional questions?
No, thank you.
Ms. Roach?
Nope.
Okay. And any additional comments, Ms. Broder? Okay, thank you very much for being here. And so I would now take, given that we fully vetted this, a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close the hearing.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so is there any additional discussion or motion to be put forward on this applicant?
I'll make a motion to approve Longwood Development Corp's request for special permit under section 3.2.7.1 and 4.3.5.1.
Through the chair, if I may, it may be more appropriate to do the variance first.
Okay. So I'll make my motion to approve the variances first under section 5.4 and section 4.3.5.1 of Auburn zoning bylaws. And then, do we need to second that motion first and then move on?
I think so, yeah,
Okay.
if we're going to split it that way. Thank you very much. So the motion's been made on the variance portion of the application. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so that's unanimous on the variance. Okay, and for the second portion, we'll take this in two parts. For the special permit, is there a motion for the special permit?
I'll make a motion for the special permit under section 3.2.7.1 and section 4.3.5.1.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, and the chair votes aye, so we're approved on both counts. I don't think that there's any other business, anything put forward for that, and I just want to double check for consistency. So, Ms. Bird, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and
Very much appreciate your time.
thank you. Good evening. Okay, just a little bit behind, trailing for a few minutes, so I think we'll go into our second hearing. We have a 7:10 PM applicant, and I'll apologize up front, Nassim Haq, and requesting a special permit under section 4.1.7 of the Auburn zoning bylaws to allow the addition of a dwelling within the flood hazard district on property located at 14 Brook Road, Auburn, Mass. Map 17, parcel 69. This hearing is continued from December 21st, 2017. And I see the applicant is present, so if you could state your name, sir.
Okay.
And perhaps give us an update from when we met last.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Nassim Haq. I'm the owner of 14 Brook Road, Auburn. This is continuation from the last hearing, and the board was asked me to specify something behind extension. So I provide all the paperwork to the board, and I'm hearing to grant me the permit, special permit.
All right, any additional comments before we open it up to the board for questions?
No.
Okay, very good. And so before I do open it up to the board for questions, I just want to acknowledge that we did receive prior to the meeting the flood storage volume report for 14 Brook Road. And if I may, just to start out quickly, Caleb, this was received prior, and I know you're in review. And could you give us just perhaps any comments on whether or not, as we'd requested, this material is consistent with our bylaws and what needs to be received for an application such as this? Is this complete? Is this what we've needed?
Yeah, through the chair, this is a complete analysis of the floodplain that has been stamped by an engineer, so I'm satisfied.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And so that, I know that would likely answer that question for all the board members. So I'll go ahead and open it up to the board for questions. Ms. Blaze?
Well, through the chair, just a little more explanation about what this exactly is and means. What did it change as far as requests coming through? Either through Caleb or through...
Through the chair, if I may, the loss of the floodplain area looks like 1.19% of the area is being lost due to this addition.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Blaze. Any additional questions? Questions for the applicant?
Not at the moment, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roach?
I'm going to reserve my questions until a little bit later, I
Very
think.
good. Okay, thank you. Mr. Cussett?
Yeah, so this is saying that you can get flood insurance. You know, I'm looking through this, the insurance companies in 2011. You had flood insurance on this property?
The attached, through the chair, the attached map is from the flood insurance program. That's just stating that the property is in fact in the flood zone. I don't think any of this material speaks to whether the applicant will be able to get flood insurance or not.
Caleb, do you have input on this project?
I don't. I did advise the applicant that he should look into flood insurance and whether he'd be able to insure the property before he sunk a lot of money into it.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's gained any information on that or not.
Have you looked into getting flood insurance?
Yes. I talked to my insurance company and they give me a code and yes.
They gave you a quote and they were willing to insure this property?
Yeah, they come, they check it and yes, I didn't get it yet because this is like a paid up, but when I start construction so I can get the insurance, but I can get it, yes. Merchant Insurance is my insurance company.
All right, so I don't have any more questions right now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cussett. Mr. Chacolo?
No questions right at this time?
Okay. Are there any other, well, actually, Ms. Roach, did you want to cycle back in now, or?
After, I want
Right.
to see if there's any.
Okay, are there any abutters present this evening? All right, if you could approach, sir, and state your name at the microphone.
On the screen, could I see a drawing, plot plan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, if you could just approach the lectern and state your name, and then proceed with your questions. Thank you.
David Balkus, 41 Rockland Road, Auburn, Mass.
All right, so it looks like your question was to look at the plan, so thank you, Caleb. So we'll give you certainly some time to absorb that if you have any additional questions. While we're doing that, if I may, a bit of housekeeping. Those that are here, and I think I might not have captured the one abutter that was here earlier, but there's a sign-in sheet. Caleb, do we have that sign-in sheet for folks that would like to speak? And so we'll make sure that folks that are here in the audience, if they could please sign that.
So I would need an explanation. I don't understand by this drawing where the new addition would be. So this is the house right here, this little square. All right, now would that include pouring a new foundation, digging dirt? Okay. So,
Did you have a specific question that you wanted to address through the chair?
yes, obviously I live in the same floodplain, and recently Mr. Chandler was here and he was attempting to build a house in the same floodplain. And we've been extremely flooded. There's a river on both sides of this house, and actually this house here is the closest to both rivers because the rivers join in a V, and this house is located in that V. And my concern when Mr. Chandler was going to build a house is any additions or foundations added to the thing is going to change the flow of water from one river to the other river. And I think it's also creating a bad precedent, building in a floodplain. I'd like to lift my house up and put a whole new 4-foot foundation around the whole thing and lift the whole thing up 4 feet so I don't get water in my basement. And I think that's creating a bad precedent in a flood zone. I think when you buy that property, we were told ahead of time it's a floodplain. And same thing goes for this. My second question is this being purchased as a live-in residence, or is this being purchased to flip and be resold?
We were told you were going to live in it, right?
Yeah, if you could approach, if you'd like to address that question. Do you have any other questions, Fidel?
Yeah, that was basically my question is if he was going to be digging into dirt and that which would alter the flow of water around the house.
Thank you very much for bringing those forward. I appreciate your comments. So, Mr. Hack, if you'd like to address any of those questions directly?
Okay. I don't make any extra addition. This is 8 feet, like the foundation is right now. It's gonna be the same, 8 feet, so I can make this house livable for my family. As I told to this honorable board, I have me, my wife, and my 3 kids. This house for that family is not enough. It's not a business, it's not, I buy that one, I can move it and leave it there.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. And I do think that addressed those questions. Are there additional abutters that would like to speak this evening? Okay, not seeing any. Additional questions from the board?
So this is going to have a new foundation, correct? Existing back wall? So there is going to be digging, excavation, and
The plan that's submitted by the applicant shows a 4-foot frost wall. I don't know that that would meet the building code for flood construction. That may change. He would have to meet the building code, and it does have special requirements in the flood zone.
Of course, yeah. No, thank you.
Through the chair
Megan?
to Caleb, really, I guess I'm having the same problem with that. The moving of dirt in a flood zone certainly is a concern for the neighbors. I lived almost on the street my entire life, floods all the time, without fail, multiple times a year. Would the flood zone codes that we have in place, would it take into account things like that? Would it?
Yeah, I couldn't say without reviewing it. I couldn't say whether he can accomplish what he's looking to accomplish and meet the building code. He may be able to, but I don't think the plan submitted would meet the building code. I think he would have to build the addition on piers at the very least to keep it out of the flood zone.
Okay.
And I don't know if those elevations are going to work or not yet.
Right. And if it was built on piers, that would avoid actual digging?
There would still have to be some digging. It would minimize it, and it would also reduce the flood area that's being lost with
Okay.
with an enclosed foundation.
It would decrease it?
Correct.
Okay.
so
Okay.
what we're voting on would be this plan right here. You could make them modify it if needed?
You could make a condition, if it were to be approved, a condition could be made that it needs to meet the building code, so the building code could alter the submitted plan. but you could also condition that the area doesn't change.
Right, but to confirm, we're not approving this plan.
yeah.
We would approve, if it were to go forward, we would approve his ability to apply. And then it would be subject to building code.
But it would have to be conditioned, right?
Standard conditions, because it would have.
Building code is state law, so he has to meet the building code no matter what. If you wanted to be precise about it, you could condition the size of the addition that you're approving so that it didn't grow.
Will the planning board and conservation commission be weighing in on this?
There's probably going to be a com filing. Planning board generally doesn't like to get involved in residential, so if he applied for waivers, they'd probably grant it.
What about the conservation commission? Yes.
I believe there would be a filing required.
So it would be, they would have jurisdiction on how much effect this would be, the losing of 1.19%.
Yeah, and it would be that board's responsibility to make sure that it was
Our
protected.
approval or denial would be based upon, can be conditioned based upon that.
Correct.
Additional questions, Mr. Cole? Mr. Cussy?
I have none.
Ms. Roach?
Not for the applicant, but I guess for Caleb. I guess I'm trying to wrestle with figuring out a way to make it work, but also, what about having a different set of plans that was up to building code looked at? I mean, I know typically.
It'd probably be premature to make them draw those plans before your board approved or denied the application.
Right.
I mean, if it
Certainly a cost.
moves forward, he's going to incur that cost getting his building permit, and it's going to have to meet the building code.
While you're thinking, if you have a follow-up, I
don't.
So along the same lines, Caleb, I was going to ask, and if we take this applicant aside for a second, for anyone that would construct in a flood zone such as this, from a building code perspective?
There's special requirements inside the flood zone where they have to provide an elevation certificate for the lowest floor level, and there's a million things that have to be reviewed.
Okay, and that's what I was going for. So there are, I mean, this is not a typical building permit by any stretch.
No.
Based on what, so, and then if we would apply back to this applicant, those same level of restrictions based on applying for a building permit, because it's existing, no new construction, would still apply. You would still have to meet that criteria for a building permit.
Correct. The new area would have to meet the criteria for the existing building, for this building code that's in effect now.
Very good. And so if I may, Mr. Hack, so I think one of the things that we're discussing, because I think that from just a kind of a perspective of caring about how much you might invest in a property such as this and the modifications that might be required, I'm not going to suggest that we would be presumptive to say you do or don't know what you're facing, but these plans as they sit will most assuredly be revised, and you'll have to walk through that alignment and those gyrations to navigate that with the building inspectors to obtain the right permit.
Was the procedure, was the code, was the law, I have to go with that, like I'm going now. So,
All right, understood. Any additional questions or comments that you'd like to share with the board?
no.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions or comments from the board?
No.
Not seeing any? Are you looking
Nope.
for something? Okay, I just didn't want to
Nope,
make
no
it short.
thanks.
And any additional comments from any abutters? If you could approach, sir. The issue is not picking on you. Folks just can't hear you at home, and we need to have that on record. Thank you, sir. I don't mean to be tedious on purpose.
I mean, another option is not changing the foundation and digging into the flood zone and the land. It is a second-story home, so living space could be added on the second floor. That would become a building permit issue, but I mean, that could be an alternative.
Well, thank you very much for that, and I appreciate your comments, and I'm sure the applicant does as well. Any additional questions, comments? Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close the hearing?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we have before us the requested information on the volume report, on the flood volume report. So that's been satisfied by our building commissioner. Any additional comments for discussion on this applicant?
No.
I
Okay.
guess I just have one between the board, and I'm not sure this is something that we can condition for should it be approved, but the building permit process does not include actual proof of flood insurance, does it?
It does not.
Okay.
Could you please repeat it, Megan?
My question was, does the building permit process require proof of flood insurance? I pretty much knew the answer was no, but I just wanted that to be on the record.
Yeah, and I would assume that because it's, again, it's a liability, it's a personal matter, right? They take on that risk and that liability as a homeowner of whether or not they're insured. But it's different from a mortgage perspective, where to secure a note, you might require.
They do.
That they have.
Yeah, my
I can almost
thoughts
see where
are
you're
just,
going with
yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
protecting it, in my opinion, with the insurance creates a better foot forward to know that it's going to be maintained, it's going to be kept up, the house isn't going to be vacated, it's not going to just be left. That's not a situation I want to put the rest of the neighborhood in. So,
Okay.
okay, I'm good.
All right, so is there a motion on this application?
I'll make a motion to grant under section 4.1.7 to allow the addition to the dwelling contingent upon approvals from the necessary boards, i.e. Conservation Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Cola. So motion's been made to grant. Is there a second?
I'll second, with a condition that the addition doesn't grow in size, stays the size that we see here.
Okay, thanks for your indulgence. I just wanted to make sure that I captured those conditions. So a motion's been made to approve and seconded with the following conditions, that it meet all applicable boards and approval is necessary relative to the applicant's forward process of approval and building codes. And then, and we have some standard language that we would put in for that, specifically on the conditions for the approval. And then the condition, Mr. Cussy, for conditioning it to ensure, even if this is modified, that in fact the size stays intact that's been originally proposed, that it not be increased.
Correct.
That the size remains consistent with what the original proposal was. And we can add that as a condition specifically on the finding, on the motion of the finding. Okay, so motion's been made and second, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Ms. Chacolo?
Made the motion.
Made the motion. Ms. Blaze?
I'll agree with those conditions.
Okay, Ms. Blaze is an aye. Ms. Roche?
I'm an aye.
And the chair will vote to approve. So, Mr. Hack, congratulations. So we have approved your application to move forward. So what I would recommend is you be in touch with Caleb and the building department so that you can take the next steps once the decision's been handed forward.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you,
Good luck to
everybody.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
So then, just move for the next one.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Like pulling teeth.
All right, running a little bit behind, and I see our third hearing is approaching, so we'll give these gentlemen just a moment to set up as we move forward. So our third applicant this evening is 720. Apologies for the delay, gentlemen. Applicant is Leicester Street Solar LLC requesting special permit under section 3.2.4.0 of the Auburn zoning bylaws for commercial solar facility on properties located at 476 and 500 Leicester Street, Auburn, Mass, map 14, parcel 3, map 15, parcel 1, and map 8, parcels 1, 2, and 10. This hearing is continued from November 16, 2017. And again, we don't have to open this as it is a continued hearing. And so I see the applicant is present. And so good evening, sir. If you could state your name and we can continue from the last hearing.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Adam Costa. I'm with the firm of Mead, Tallerman and Costa in Newburyport, and I represent Leicester Street Solar, which has the application, five separate applications that are before you, but all related, all pertaining to a series of lots that comprise a single property that you see on the board that's on the easel before you. As you said, Mr. Chairman, we were before you back in mid-November. We presented the project to you. We answered a series of questions from board members and a few from the audience as well. And at that time, I think the chief point of discussion was a concern that was had, and I don't want to speak for him, I know he's in attendance, but a concern that was had by your building inspector or building commissioner relative to the manner in which the property in question was being divided. We had explained to you that we have a single property. It's comprised of multiple parcels, but it's being proposed for development with 5 separate facilities. We have submitted a plan and obtained an endorsement from your planning board, an approval not required endorsement, creating a series of lots, 8 lots in total, 5 lots which will have 5 separate 1 megawatt projects, and then 3 additional lots that are essentially approximately 10-foot wide lots that serve as dividers between these various other lots that will be developed with the solar projects. We explained at the time that the rationale for doing so is not to try and avoid zoning requirements or anything of the sort. We could create one project on this site, 5 megawatts, utilizing the frontage that we've got, and we would be permitted to do that under zoning with approval from this board. The reason for the division is simply to avail ourselves of the credits that are available through the SMART program, which is the newest of the programs available in Massachusetts for the development of solar energy systems. So we discussed that at the last meeting. Again, your building commissioner had some concerns, and it was agreed that the best approach was to get further guidance from me in terms of what my position is, and the law that I explained to you, I believe, supports that position, and to get guidance from your town council as well. That has occurred. I appreciate the board's indulgence. We had to seek a couple of continuances of prior sessions or scheduled sessions of the public hearing so that we could allow sufficient time for that to occur. But I did see yesterday that in response to a letter that I had provided several weeks ago, your town council has responded and has essentially confirmed what I represented to the board, that this is not an end run around zoning, that this is something that is permissible pursuant to the protections that are provided under Massachusetts law for solar energy systems, and that it is consistent with what we're trying to achieve through the SMART program. One thing that he did mention that I had acknowledged in the letter that I provided to him was that a concern of the board, or at least of your building commissioner, was access. That notwithstanding the issue of frontage, even if these lots need not have frontage, some of the lots in the rear with these 1 megawatt facilities, they need to be accessible, and they need to be accessible from a public way. And so what I had offered to do through email exchanges with your town council was certainly propose to the board and express our willingness to accept a condition that would require that easements or cross easements be recorded to ensure that that access exists. And we would do that. We can't do it now. That was the first question from your town council, thinking that these lots were in separate ownership. He said, are there cross easements on record? I said, well, there can't be, because it's a premise of law that you can't grant an easement to yourself or over property that you have in common ownership, because the easement interest and the fee interest legally merge into the same interest. And so what we would do is we would accept a condition if this board sees fit to grant the permit that prior to conveyance of any of these lots to a separate entity, that we would record a cross easement. I can represent to you, as I've done in writing to your council, that there is no intention of conveying these lots into separate ownership. I think what I had said to you when we were before you in mid-November is that what will occur is the properties will be kept in common ownership, but for purposes of availing themselves of the credits available under state law, the individual projects, the actual personal property, will be separately owned in individual LLCs for each of the individual projects, but they'll all be interconnected to one another. But the real property itself will stay in common ownership, so there may never be a need to even record those easements, but certainly we have no intention of depriving any of these lots of access to the public way. Just so the board knows where we are in the permitting process, we not only require a permit from your board, a special permit, we also require a planning board approval, site plan approval, and we require approvals from your Conservation Commission. 3 of these lots require determinations of applicability, and 2 others require orders of conditions. We've made those applications. Those are pending before Conservation Commission. We were last before the commission in mid-December, December 12th. We were last before your planning board on November 28th. Again, we've continued those proceedings because all of those boards are sort of pointing to you and saying, you've got to go to zoning first, you've got to get approval of the use before we're going to spend our time really delving into the substance of the applications that are before us. There has been a peer review that was conducted through the planning board process. We've received a letter back from Graves Engineering. Graves had a series of comments relative to things like the need for access surrounding the property, the width of the driveway, the access drive, providing safe access to each of these facilities. Our engineer is present and certainly can answer your questions tonight, but we are in agreement with those comments, and we will certainly modify the plans as the planning board requests through that site plan approval process. But again, the planning board has been looking to us and saying, you've got to go to ZBA first, you've got to get approval of the use before you continue the site plan review process, so we know what it is that we're approving. That's my understanding anyway. Certainly, I know your building commissioner's here, and he can either echo or my comments or correct me if I'm mistaken. But that's where we are today, and we're certainly happy to answer any questions that the board might have or that the public might have, or respond to any concerns.
No, thank you very much for being here. Thanks for your comments, and I know your patience. It's certainly quite a process. And so before I open it up to the board, I'm just going to acknowledge that we did receive a letter and correspondence that you referred to from the town attorney, Attorney Hennigan. And yeah, I know Caleb, that had gone through based on some of the comments that the applicant had shared this evening. And so before I open it up to members of the board, if I may, Caleb, from just your satisfaction perspective, did that letter address as intended what our questions were at the last hearing?
Yes, through the chair, I'd agree with Attorney Costa. After reviewing the case law with the town council, it appears that if the board feels that the applicant is providing access by another means, that the back lots are not required to have road frontage.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So I'm going to open it up to members of the board for questions. And so, Ms. Roach?
Nothing.
Okay. Ms. Blaze?
I don't know.
We can certainly circle back. Would you like to circle back?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, very good. Just going this way out of courtesy, but not trying to be pushy as a detriment. Mr. Chacolo?
No, I'm, as long as Mr. Moody is satisfied, that would have been my only drawback. That letter from the correspondence between the 2 attorneys satisfied Caleb as to his question about no frontage, and that the way, if needed ever, the easement would be granted is acceptable.
That's acceptable to me.
Other than that, I'm all set.
Thank you, Mr. Chacolo. Mr. Cossi?
I'm good as long as it's conditioned where if any properties get sold, the right-of-ways are approved, so.
Yeah, and Mr. Cossi, and I'll add my comments for the chair. I mean, I'm in agreement. I think that that's an accommodation that was reasonable, that was discussed between two attorneys. And I'd like to see that as a scripted condition in the, I call it a finding, but in the decision, excuse me. Any additional questions?
No.
Okay. Circle back to decide just for a moment and see if there are any additional thoughts or questions.
I want to wait for our butters.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, very good. All right, so are there any abutters this evening that would like to speak? If you could please approach her and give us your name and an overview of your questions and concerns.
My name is Roland Mason. I'm 467 Auburn Street and directly abutting the property. I built a house about 8 years ago, and I purchased another lot adjacent to my house, which an acre and a half lot, which abuts this project. And when I bought the lot, it was this land was zoned as residential R, I think, which, and now if it's going to be changed to commercial or whatever, I would think the setback requirement, right now the plan is to have solar panels within 20 feet of my property line. And like I said, I can see it from my back porch. And I just, if it's going to, zoning was going to be changed, I would like to see the setback for the solar panels a little further than 20 feet, since they are requesting a change. That's the rest I would have. I don't have a certain amount, but I would think it would be reasonable to have the first solar panels more than 20 feet away from my property line, as it reduces the value of my property. So, I guess that's about it.
Thank you very much for your comments, and thank you for being here.
Through the chair, if I may, if I can just address the change in zoning. There is no change in zoning. Solar has a protection under Chapter 48, Section 3, that we cannot outlaw it in certain districts. Our bylaw doesn't address solar fields. This is still a residential district. We're not changing the zoning. We're simply, the applicant simply applied for a special permit to construct this in a residential district. There's nothing in our bylaw that prevents that at the current time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for sharing that. I was having the same thoughts of responding to that question based on the abutters' comments regarding any zoning changes. But I would like to give the applicant an opportunity perhaps to address the proximity to the property line and how close, in fact, that installation will be as far as setbacks.
For the record, Nick Fasandola, excuse me, Level Design Group, we're the civil engineer for the project, and I believe the abutters parcel is located this area of concern in the town of Leicester, and what we have here is a setback of 50 feet from the closest array to that property line.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. The folks at home are just missing out on all of these jewels.
So the panels are 50 feet at the closest point to the abutters property line. We spoke about this matter at the previous planning board hearing, and the applicant has offered to add some screening plantings along that property line in the disturbed area to mitigate any possible site issues, as far as aesthetics with the panels. But from what I understand, the applicant's dwelling is approximately 300 to 400 feet from the property line, and that whole area between there and the house is pretty well wooded. So that's the existing condition of that sight line from the abutter's dwelling to the panels. Like I said, just to reiterate, we are 50 feet from the property line, and we will be planting mitigation plantings along that side.
Thank you for those comments and that clarification. While you're there, if you just hold fast for one moment, and I want to reach back to our building commissioner. So could you speak just in clarification to the requirement on setbacks for a project such as this from an abutter's property line? Do we have, and I apologize that I didn't do that research prior to the meeting.
I would just say that they would have to meet the setbacks for the RR district, I believe, which I have to look it up, but I believe 50 feet more than meets that requirement for a side setback.
All right, thank you very much. I just didn't have a number in my mind. All right, thank you. Thank you very much for those comments. I appreciate you addressing those items. Additional comments from the abutters? And sir, if you would like to speak a second time, we'll certainly give you an opportunity to do that. Thank you, sir. If you could just tell us your name and tell us about your concerns.
Tom Shannon, 460 Leicester Street. And just at the beginning of the meeting, the attorney said approval not required was already approved by the planning board. Is that true?
Through the chair, the approval not required plan was signed by the planning board.
Does that mean this plan has to go to the planning board for conditions or not?
The A&R plan that was signed previously by the planning board was just for the division of the land. This will still go to site plan approval for the planning board, peer review, and the planning board can order whatever studies they see fit, traffic studies, stormwater studies, whatever they wish to ask for.
Anyway, and my concern is also on the setback where they're building a retention basin right on my lot line. And I suppose that would be dealt with by the planning board.
I would agree. The peer review would touch on the location of the basin.
Peer review by Graves, is that a public record? Can I come and take a look at it?
Yes.
Anyway, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you answering those questions.
Through the chair, if I can just clarify, the side setback is 20 feet in that district.
It is a 20-foot setback. So given the proximity of a 50-foot setback, as the engineer of the project had mentioned, that's well within our required setbacks. Okay. Gentlemen, before you continue, I did just wanted to acknowledge and see if the first abutter that had spoken, sir, if you have any additional follow-up questions?
Oh, I understand.
And I apologize for doing this, but if I may ask you to come up to the microphone and ask your additional question. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, my understanding from the last meeting we had is it was going to be 20 feet from the line, so there was no mention of 50 feet the last meeting. It was 20 feet. In the map I saw, this is a different map than I saw the last time. So. Has it been changed? No, it's not the same map.
For the record, the plan has not changed since the initial submission to the zoning board, planning board, and conservation commission.
Thank you for that confirmation. I appreciate that. So, sir, I'm assuming that you don't have any additional questions this evening? You don't have any additional questions for us this evening?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. All right. What was there? Mr. Costa, was there a follow-up that you wanted to ask?
Not per se, Mr. Chairman. I would, I guess, note for the record, because the topic of screening was brought up, at least with respect to this gentleman's property, the plans, as you just heard, have not been modified since we first made our submittal. We've been dealing with communicating with town council, and so the plans that were submitted to conservation, planning, and to zoning have not been modified. And of course, the process is still underway with planning, and it's dangerous to modify the plan before one board when it's still undergoing site plan approval. With that said, while we would expect that this board would to the extent that it sees fit to grant approval, make that approval subject to planning board endorsement, we would certainly accept a condition that required, to the liking of the planning board, that appropriate screening be placed in that location. I've never known a planning board to refuse an opportunity for screening. As you heard, it just so happens that the status of development in that location now is such that the abutters abutters residence is a fair distance beyond the boundary, but we recognize that abutters have the right to develop their property as they see fit, and if they were to develop it in the future and to come closer, we understand that they might want that screening. So we're happy to provide it as an accommodation if the board feels it's appropriate.
Thank you very much for your comments and thoughtful consideration, certainly of the abutters' concerns. So I'm going to bring it back to the board. The abutters present this evening have had an opportunity to speak. And so, Ms. Chacolo, any additional questions?
My question again involves Caleb. Will we be issuing 5 separate permits, each one conditioned by the future consideration of a possible easement?
In speaking with town council, the parcels, whether they're owned by different entities, they're all under one control. Zoning law talks more about who controls the rights to the property. It's all currently under one control, so one permit could be issued for all, to cover all parcels.
And one condition?
Correct.
Possible future easement? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Mr. Costa?
No questions.
Okay. Ms. Blaze?
No questions, just the easements, they'll be set there for like fire trucks could get through, things like that, if something should happen. That's part of the purpose. Not necessarily for future if you split these up and sell them, correct? It's for now, for emergency vehicles to get through, during construction, things like that. Is that correct?
If I may, the easements aren't going to come into play unless the properties are sold separately. There's going to be access roads that traverse multiple properties who are all under one control, one owner, if that makes sense. So there is a plan. They can talk about their plan, but there is a plan for access roads that traverse more than one property and actually cross over different properties, I believe.
Would you mind addressing that?
That's correct. So as I had stated before, we would record easements immediately, knowing the board's concern, except that the property is currently in common ownership and the intention is for it to remain that way. Consequently, there's no ability to create easements that one is conveying to oneself. We would certainly accept a condition requiring those in the future, and the sole purpose of requiring those in the future is today, where the property's in common ownership, there's no question about the ability of a landlocked lot or the owner of that lot or the operator of that lot to utilize the lot that has frontage. But in the future, if those lots were in separate ownership, that could become a question. Right. And so the easement would verify that in perpetuity, per the Registry of Deeds records, that right of access exists, and the right of access would be for all purposes for which streets and ways are used in the town of Auburn is typically the language that's used in that kind of an easement.
Thank you very much. Nothing further.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Blaze. Ms. Roach?
No, nothing for the applicant. Maybe board discussion, but nothing for the applicant.
All right, very good. So no additional comments from the board? Any additional comments from the applicant that you'd like to share before we close the hearing?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there's one additional comment, and I just want to offer a point of clarity, and I don't disagree with what your building commissioner has said or what town council has opined on, which is that because the property is currently in common ownership, you could, if the board saw fit to do so, and if this is how the application was made, issue a single special permit, and because it governs the land that's in common ownership, it could be recorded in the chain of title to the property, and it would be effective. However, for purposes of the SMART program and for purposes of qualifying for the credits under that program, and the reason why we've gone through this sort of painstaking process of dividing the lots up, we are seeking 5 separate decisions. And in fact, to that end, we've made 5 separate applications, not only to your board, but also to planning and conservation. We've paid 5 separate filing fees, and we've published and paid for 5 separate publications for that very purpose. So the decisions will look identical, but the applicants on each of these permit applications are different. The ownership is the same, but as as you know, Mr. Chairman, the applicant doesn't necessarily need to be the property owner. You need the authorization from the property owner, which we have, but the applicants are separate LLCs for each of these permits. And so we would hope that, understanding that it's extra work for the board, and I apologize, I'd be happy to assist with the drafting of the decision if it's of help to the board, but we would be looking for 5 separate, nearly identical decisions, all of which could include the same conditions of easements and screening and so forth, but that is what our request is.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that it was our intent to move forward and perhaps collapse a little bit of that paperwork, quite frankly. But I think that, as you've articulated, I mean, the intent is, in fact, based on the types of applications that you filed for a very specific purpose. And so with those comments, I'm going to just revert back to Caleb, is recognizing that we can roll these up as recommended under one special permit. Is there any objection, as the applicant is outlined, for us to take these as 5 individual permits?
No, I would just say if the applicants applied and paid 5 application fees, they're entitled to 5 decisions.
I'm in agreement, but I certainly wanted to vet that through your acknowledgement in your office, and I'm glad that you brought that forward, because that was not in the front of my mind.
And I apologize for interrupting. I sincerely apologize. I represent a number of municipal boards myself, and I know it's additional work to draft 5 separate decisions. For one, no apology necessary, and you certainly do what you've asked for in the manner that you've asked for it and articulated based on the way you've presented it. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because I wasn't thinking along those lines, and we certainly wouldn't want to make that decision and then cut you out of that opportunity to file as you've provided. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments that you'd like to bring forward?
Not from the applicant.
All right, thank you very much. Any additional questions or comments before I close the public hearing?
None.
Okay, so I'll take a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close.
Thank you.
For a second? Okay, so raised in second. All those in favor?
We just had on the butter, he was raising his hand.
Oh, okay, and so it's raised in second, so we'll retract, and I'll allow the abutter to approach for one final follow-up. You okay?
Just one question on how an easement works. Like Mr. Costa said, that easement between all the properties and like any town road or access, would anybody have access to the easement?
I'd like actually the experts to address this directly. I mean, my initial thought is no, it would be restricted based on whom the easement is granted for, but Mr. Costa, if you could address that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that's correct. I mean, the easement would be a private property interest. These are, after all, private property. So the same as one neighbor whose driveway happens to pass over an adjacent property might gain an easement from that adjacent property owner to allow that driveway to exist and to pass and repass for purposes of access. That's the same purpose for which these easements would exist. Of course, that means that public safety personnel would have access the same way that they could drive up your driveway to your home. If you call 911 and an ambulance shows up, they have that right of access.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
You've articulated it far better than I. Thank you. And so I would just add that, does that satisfy your question, sir? All right, very good. And so without any further questions or comments from either the applicant or any butters, I'll return back to, I perhaps would suggest that we need to entertain a motion first again to close the hearing.
Motion to close the hearing.
All right, has been made. And seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so we are close to public, and I believe that Ms. Roach, you would raise the question of open discussion once the hearing is closed. Did you have a question that you'd like to address or vet through the board? And while you're thinking, I'll just offer for the other board members, if there's, we can certainly make a motion where the intent here is to address each specific application. So we have 5 before us, and we'll take them as individual motions. And I don't know if that helped. I would assume that
no,
that any questions or
I-
comments you had would cover
Yeah, I
all
was
5 of them?
just- yeah, I was
So
just
opening
thinking in my
one of them, or making a motion toward one of them, wouldn't go in that linear direction.
No, I think I'm good.
I'm happy to have another 30-second hang
No,
time
no,
to
I'm
make
all
sure
set.
that
I'm good.
we respect your thoughts or anything you'd like to share.
No, thanks.
Very good, all right. So the way we will work through this is we'll work through it by parcel, because I think that's the most logical for me. So we have before us, just for clarity's sake, parcel 3, parcel 1, parcel 2, parcel 3, parcel 10, and parcel. All right, let's just
If I may,
break that. Yeah,
the chair.
Caleb, if you want to redirect this a little bit, because I'm looking at this and I'm missing a parcel.
So you're going to start with map 14, parcel 3. Second parcel would be map 15, parcel 1. Third would be map 8, parcel 1. The fourth would be map 8, parcel 2. And the fifth would be map 8, parcel 10.
Really appreciate you untangling that. What I was trying to do was just get to parcel 1, 2, and 3 and run through it, but they're on different maps, so we'll scribe through it exactly as it's been written. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Please.
I'd like to make a motion that we, under section 3.2.4.0, to grant special permits according to the applicant's request as listed with maps and parcels, and each one of those parcels have a separate special permit issued attached to it.
I appreciate you articulating in that fashion. I do believe that we would need to step through the vote and not be able to roll them up into one motion.
No, I didn't mean to roll them up.
Okay, very good.
I meant to roll them up into one motion, yes, but separated permits.
Okay.
5 special
Very good.
permits.
So the motion's been made that we separate into five permits as we're logistically just clunking through this.
Through the chair, if you just want to take separate votes on each map and parcel number with a consistent motion.
Right.
I think the language is going to remain the same for
I
each
agree
one.
with you, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. I completely agree. Okay, so the motion has been made to move forward, and we could have a second as stated, and walk through each parcel.
I'll second.
Okay. All right, and so we'll take a vote. Motion's been made and seconded, and we'll take a vote for map 14, parcel 3 on special permit.
Mr. Chairman, could I raise a point of order? I understand the public hearing is closed. I intend to offer no new information into the record, but just a point of clarity. I believe that the 5 map and parcel numbers that were referenced, at least according to our engineer, are the map and parcel numbers that comprised this property before it was combined and redivided into individual separate lots through the A&R procedure. So I just want the board's vote to represent what it intends to accomplish here. What we've requested is we made application for 5 new lots recently created through an A&R endorsement, lots 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 shown on the A&R plan, and we're seeking special permits for each of those lots, and those are what we applied for. The map and parcel numbers that are referenced here, we've just matched them up. They meet with the map and parcel numbers that together comprise this property originally, but those map and parcel numbers have no separate meaning any longer because the property has been combined and redivided.
Again, I thank you for jumping in, and I think that that's an important clarification to make sure that the decision is scripted correctly.
So through the chair, you can take 5 separate votes on lots 1 through 5 as referenced on the applicant's A&R plan.
Very good. All right, so as stated, we'll proceed exactly that way, and I thank both the gentlemen, Caleb, and thank you, Mr. Costa, for clarifying that, because our decision, in fact, would have been incorrect if we moved in that direction for those numbers. Thank you for that clarity. Okay, so we'll recoil this just for a moment, and then we'll move forward as stated by Caleb. And I won't articulate the first part of that, but we are looking at parcels 1 through 5. So we'll take a vote on parcel 1. Mr. Chacolo?
You want a motion or you want to vote?
I think that we need a motion as stated by Caleb first, correct? Because Caleb can't make the motion.
So the motion would read to approve a special permit under section 3.2.4.0 of the Auburn zoning bylaw for a commercial solar facility on property located at Lot 1 as referenced on the A&R plan approved by the planning board.
Motion as stated.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Yep, so we're
I'm a
gonna
no.
want this conditioned also with the easement, right? If the property should change hands.
Yeah, the language as presented by the applicant I think is sufficient. If it should change hands, we can work that into the decision.
All right.
Okay, so condition's been applied, and so motion and seconded
Yep.
by Mr. Cussy. Ms. Blaze?
Approve.
Ms. Roche?
I am a no.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, that's for lot 1. We've made the motion, so we'll move to a vote for lot 2.
Vote, or do you want a separate motion?
Motion.
You need some.
We need a motion.
I think the motion as previously stated for Lot 2 would be sufficient.
I'll make a motion for, as previously stated, covering Lot 2 to approve.
I'll second.
Okay. Ms. Blaze?
Approve.
Ms. Roche?
I'm a no.
Okay, and the chair is a yes. Okay, so for lot 3,
I'll make a motion to approve Lot 3 as previously, motion as previously stated for Lot 3.
very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Blaze?
Approve.
Ms. Roche?
Nope.
And the chair will vote yes. Okay,
I'll make a motion to approve for Lot 4, motion to read as previously stated.
is there a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Mr. Cussy. Ms. Blaze?
Approve.
Ms. Roche?
No.
And the chair approves. Okay, I think we're down to lot 5. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve for Lot, as previously stated, to cover Lot 5.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
And we'll go through Ms. Blaze.
Approve.
Ms. Roche?
No.
Okay. And the chair votes yes to approve. Okay, and with our board being comprised of 5 members, there's not a supermajority that's necessary. And so all 5 lots through the motion that you've heard have been approved. So congratulations, gentlemen. I appreciate you walking through this process. It's certainly still beginning for you, I'm sure, but look forward to the outcome and your success here.
And thank you for your time and your courtesy. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you walking through certainly some of those logistical steps for us as well. Sure. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay. I believe we have a little bit of housekeeping this evening. Some decisions to be signed.
was absent last meeting. Oh, yeah, look. She put absent right on there.
Yeah.
Nice work. What am I saying?
There's 3 different ones there. The applicant had 3 decisions.
Is it the Mary D thing? No, it can't be. Because yeah, that's old.
Should be right on the file which one it is. What's the file folder itself say? It should have the address right on it.
December 21st. She says long in there. December 1, February.
These are both separate ones.
Oh, that one's the credit union.
Oh, yeah, yes, that's the credit union.
There's that one. That one. And then that one.
Oh, okay, they're all on top.
They have
So there were
special
3
permits
things.
and variances. If you want to pass that one down, they can establish it.
I was absent, so that's the spa one, the Oxford Street one.
Okay.
Just one.
Oh, the Oxford spot.
Mm-hmm. This one is the one is the credit union. So 3 different decisions, 3 signatures.
Thank you.
Must be this one. So it's gonna be 7.
I took them off because my staple was right next to where my signature goes. There are 3 of them there, yes.
Okay, this is the special permit for the accessory apartment on Pack and Park. This one's the Sword Street variant, Sword Street. This is solar on Lodgedale Street.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe like midnight, less than 3.
You up? While we're waiting for some of that, Caleb and your team, these decisions, both in consistency and content, are fantastic. And so I'm a bit ashamed of what but we've evolved, right? So thank you for that. And
We
it
have.
puts the stress out of the meeting, for sure. That's a separate one. Okay, that's perfect. So those go
I'll put it
back.
back
Okay,
away.
thank you. Oh, yeah, thanks. Excuse me.
That's all 3 on one. That's good. That's good.
Minutes to approve.
Right, yeah.
That's good.
Okay, just to double check, so any, were there minutes this evening to vote on? I think there was one. Okay, and so for, is there a motion to accept the November 16, 2017 minutes as presented and written?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from November 16th as stated and written.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, and the chair is aye, so thank you very much for putting those together for us. I think that's all of the, I just want to double check, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and through 5 of the decisions minutes. Our next meeting is February 15th, 2018, and with that, I think we are adjourned. I'll take a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.